Well, let's pray and get started. Lord, we come before you again tonight, and I pray that you would, as I prayed last week and through these weeks, through this period of September, Lord, would you be stirring up a hunger for your word, a deep hunger, a kind of a desire, a thirst, an inbuilt desire, a natural desire to read and study and wrestle with this word you've given us. If anything, Lord, I pray that our scriptures would be so rooted in our lives after the time we've spent together, and that it would be a sure anchor for our spiritual lives. So I pray you do that through all the information, Lord, would you be stirring up a hunger for your word. And as we speak, Lord Jesus, in very real ways about your anticipated return, oh Lord, I really pray, we pray together that just that simple knowledge would produce in us a deep hope. That despite the troubles we're going through now, the troubles we will still go through, that we would be anchored with a certainty and a confidence and a conviction, knowing that you rule above it all and you're coming one day to make all things right. Please will you root that deep in our lives, I pray. And would that in itself stir up within us a patient faithfulness to you, Lord Jesus, and to your kingdom program. Would you do these three things, I pray. Amen. All right, so last week I introduced you to the three major millennial views, so views related to the idea of 1,000-year intermediate state before the final wrapping up of things. And remember, I said to you last week that don't be fooled. This debate amongst millennial views is not around Revelation 20. That's part of it, but it goes way, way, way deeper than that, which I think answers the question, why would we spend time talking about this? If it's just one verse, sure, that would be crazy, but it's not. And you're going to see that tonight. So that's where we're going tonight, really digging deep into the principles of reading the Bible, the assumptions we bring to reading the Bible. Basically, what I want to do tonight is answer the question, why do we have three views? How is it that you have super smart, super godly people that since the beginning of the church for thousands of years have put their heads together and yet still have not come to a combined conclusion about these things that are in our scriptures? Like, how does that happen? Well, part of that is going to come out tonight, where we are going to see just the various assumptions and models and ways we read the Bible that lead to these models. So that's largely my purpose. I said to you last week as well, I don't know if it's primary or secondary, but a large part of what we're doing here is my aim isn't to tell you what to think about the millennium. I mean, to be sure, I'm going to share with you what I think, and I've had a journey around this. That's not my primary aim, is to tell you what to think. I'm honest with you, my primary aim is to teach you how to think, if I can. How to think, how to be reading the Bible in a way that leads to theological frameworks or theologies that are true and correct and guide you. And I just really want you to know up front, like honestly, that's my purpose. I do have a view, it is going to come out, but my aim is as we're walking through this, not to tell you what to think, but to, if I can, teach you sort of how to think about these things. In other words, what I'm really hoping to do in these weeks, my aim is that we all just become better students of the Bible, and in our better studying of the Bible, we end up with better models, whatever those models are. But the primary aim is to be better students of the Bible. So that's where we're going to go tonight, is into these underlying views that influence, that result in these millennial views. And my journey from one millennial view to another has been shaped by these underlying principles, not Revelation 20. And so we're going to get into that tonight. But I thought, let's start first with kind of to get us started, to refresh your memories about these millennial frameworks, and a kind of a fun exercise to get us going, let's do what we did last week at the end. Remember, I went through the millennial views and then we applied them to Daniel chapter 2 and the statue and saw, okay, the amillennial view would see this, premillennial view would see this. Let's do the same thing, but now let's do it with Daniel chapter 7. Because we finished studying that on Sunday. So Daniel 7 should be fresh in your mind. And so we're going to have another closer look at Daniel chapter 7. I did not by a long shot get to the detail in Daniel chapter 7. We won't even get into it a lot tonight. But let's get into it. Let's have a look at Daniel 7. Let's pull out the data points. So if you missed that last week, I kind of was saying to you that often when we're building theological models, we have these data points, which are Bible verses and passages and ideas, and we're trying to find a model that best connects all the dots. And so let's go to Daniel 7. Let's pull out all the dots. Let's apply an amillennial kind of grid, see how many dots it matches, and let's apply a premillennial grid and see how many dots it matches, and then start to think through what we might be thinking about these views. Does that sound good? All right. So let me first just remind you of these models, just to keep it fresh in your mind. And for those who missed last week, there are no more notes, unfortunately, but this, if you've got a note, will be bigger sort of in front of you. So the premillennial view basically sees the final state as the new heavens and new earth. That's eternity, that's the forever place, but sees that there is an additional stage preceding that final stage, and that is this millennium. So the word millennium comes from, in Revelation 20, where it's spelled out that the time is 1,000 years. We believe that's literally or not. Either way, it's an intermediate state before one gets to that final state. That millennium is preceded by a very defined period of tribulation. Generally, we say great tribulation because we have persecution now around the world, but it's an intensifying of that. And there is a particular figure involved in that who leads that persecution, who is the Antichrist. So prior to the millennium is this period, a defined period. For premillennials, it's a defined period. And we'll talk about that tonight, of tribulation that then leads to the second coming of Christ, the resurrection of believers, and coupled with existing living believers who then reign over the earth with Jesus in a very physical sense for this defined period. After that millennial period, there is a second resurrection of the wicked or the unrighteous, and the final eternal destinies are then sorted out at that point. So that's the premillennial view. I'm not going to go into the post-millennial view. We're largely not focusing on that anymore. And the amillennial view sees as well the final state is a new heavens and new earth. It is precipitated, by the second coming of Christ. So Christ comes again. Oh, there's no multiple stages of judgment. It's he comes, judgment, boom. It's the end game, but in a positive way. We're living our best lives in the new heavens and new earth, and it's over. So there's still a final state, there is still a judgment, there is still a second coming of Christ, but no intermediate state. Some amillennials, if you look at this diagram here, there's kind of two views. Most amillennials will really see the tribulation as something that's happened in the past, or likely it's just something that there's some persecution, but there's also some good and some kingdom coming, but there's no defined period per se of specific intentional persecution. Most of them would say, yeah, there will be an intense time later, but it's just not given that same kind of defined characteristics. It's largely just seen as symbolic. Okay. So you got that in your minds? Amil, premill. By now, maybe you've thought a little bit last week about where you think you might end up. So let's do the Daniel 7 test, shall we? So, Bibles out. If your Bibles are out, I'll have a few of the scriptures on the screens, but not all of them. So verse 1 to 14 was week 1 when we came back to Daniel. So that's just the vision itself. And I think I just want to focus on verse 7 to 8. So the first three beasts, we're all comfortable with that, right? We're good with. So the fourth beast, let's just draw some attention there. So after this, I saw in the night visions, and behold, a fourth beast, terrifying, dreadful, exceedingly strong. It had great iron teeth. It devoured and broke in pieces and stamped what was left with its feet. So again, tracking with beasts, we're kind of comfortable with the fact that that was historic Rome. But it was different from all the beasts that were before it, and it had 10 horns. While I considered the 10 horns, behold, there came up among the 10 horns another horn, a little one, before which 3 of the 10 horns were plucked up by the roots. And behold, in this little horn were eyes like the eyes of a man, and a mouth speaking great things. Quick interpretive note, great is not a good thing. It is boastful words. If you read the NIV, it makes it clear. And also, quick shout out, let me just state for the record, when you're reading Daniel, it is better not to read the ESV. I know Zai is going to be so happy. We have this long-standing NIV, ESV, and I'm just going to say it on record. NIV for Daniel, much better than ESV. You can have that one of the 66 books, brother. It's one of 66. You got this one. So speaking boastful things, that's an important note. Boastful, arrogant things. So just detail the beast, Rome, we're okay with 10 horns, another little horn that subdues 3 of them. By violent means, plucked it up. Horn is a symbol of a king, of power. And so it's a kind of a violent overthrow of some sort, and boastful. So just note those are data points that we're going to have to connect. We carry on reading and we go through, and it's the picture of the Ancient of Days, and that's all wonderful. Verse 9 to 10. Then 11 to 12 is the judgment scene. So I looked then, because of the sound of the boastful words that the horn was speaking. And as I looked, the beast was killed, its body destroyed, and given over to be burned with fire. So this beast is judged. Remember, the Ancient of Days is a courtroom scene, and the outcome is in a judgment, and the beast is condemned and destroyed. As for the rest of the beasts, their dominion was taken away, so their kind of ruling power was taken away, but their lives were prolonged for a season and a time. So in some way, they still exist, but without ruling power. So just note that, that's a data point. And then we carry on reading. Verse 13 to 14 is the beautiful vision of one like a son of man. How cool. If you get freaked out by Daniel, just read chapter 7 over and over again because it's so awesome. Right, then from verse 15, what we looked at on Sunday is the interpretation. So where the angel gives a specific interpretation. Verse 15 to 17, beasts are kingdom. We got that one. Then verse 18, you might remember from Sunday, introduction of new material from the angel, where he's saying something that was not in Daniel's original recounting of the dream. So verse 18, but the saints of the Most High shall receive the kingdom and possess the kingdom forever, forever and ever. Don't you love how emphatic that is? It's not forever and ever, forever, forever and ever. So saints of the Most High possess the kingdom. That's an important data point. As I said on Sunday, it comes up 2 more times. Let me just pull those up so you've got them on the same screen. And verse 22, and the time came when the saints possessed the kingdom, this forever, forever and ever kingdom. Verse 27, and the kingdom and the dominion and the greatness of the kingdoms under the whole heaven shall be given to the people of the saints of the Most High. It's an everlasting kingdom. All dominions shall serve and obey him. So those are important data points to log into your mind as you start thinking about a framework. Then in verse 19 to 20, he basically recaps a little bit, nothing new. And then verse 21 to 22, Daniel says this, as I looked, this horn made war with the saints and prevailed over them. Right, so the little horn, who I told you on Sunday, is this, we say, the Antichrist, makes war with the saints, so persecutes the people of God and prevails over them. Like he has dominion. He kind of persecutes and kills and, prevails over them. Until the Ancient of Days came and judgment was given. It's the same scene we saw before, just elaborated on. So this judgment comes by the Ancient of Days Judgment was given. So first against the beast, but now positively for the saints of the Most High. And the time came when the saints possessed the kingdom. And so in other words here, I'm just wanting to point out persecution. That's a data point, a time of great persecution, followed by judgment, which is specifically for the saints, followed by possessing the kingdom. So persecution, judgment, possessing the kingdom as the data points. Then we carry on with the interpretation of the angels. So verse 23, as it refers to Rome. Verse 24 is interpretation around the 10 horns in particular. So as for the 10 horns, out of this kingdom, so out of the kingdom, 10 horns, 10 kings shall arise, and then another arises after them. He shall be different from the former ones and shall put down 3 kings. So that's the interpretation of the little horn plucking out 3 horns, is it's this king that then dominates over 3 of the other 10 kings. So note that. And then in verse 25, I did not get time to go into this on Sunday, and it's fascinating. I won't even have time to get into it tonight, but you can ask questions about it tomorrow. But it's the interpretation of what this little horn does. 4 things. He shall speak words against the Most High. That's how we know it's not great words. It's words against the Most High. It's an arrogant religious boasting against God, a kind of, I am God, there's no other God. So it speaks words against the Most High, will wear out the saints of the Most High. So not a euphemism, it's make war and prevail. Shall think to change the times and the law. So meaning will reorder society in some way. Could be, some people think that, and that's where back when Hitler was doing his thing, it was of course appropriate to think that he was potentially of the kind of an antichrist, and he did try to reorder society, but perhaps mostly what this is about is religious laws and some perhaps changing religious laws, but we won't have time to get into that, but you can ask if you like. But that's what he'll do, and he'll change the times and the law, and they shall be given into his hand for a time, times, and half a time. So a limited period of time. And we'll actually come back to the interpretation of that in a little bit. And then in verse 26 is judgment and then kingdom given to the saints. So that's an overview. I hope you're just logging data points. What's clear for us? So if you're reading this, what's clear and what everybody agrees on is that there is this handing over of the kingdom of God, one that's eternal and never to be destroyed, is handed over to the saints of the Most High. It's the Son of Man who first earns the title deed to it through his death and resurrection, gets presented before the Ancient of Days, and who then can delegate it to those who are with him, the followers of Jesus. So kingdom given to the saints is clear. Nobody's really debating that. Secondly, that there is a time of persecution. That's clear in this passage. Am I right? This is not making stuff up. This seems quite obvious. And that there is a judgment. Can you see those 3 things? At the very least, what's clear? Kingdom given to saints, time of persecution, and a judgment. But that's what's clear. But within those 3 questions, what kind of kingdom is it? What does that look like for the saints, the people of God, to be given the kingdom? Don't you want to know? What is that like? So we all agree there's a entrusting of the kingdom to believers. What kind of kingdom is it? Second, on the issue of persecution, we all agree there's a time of great persecution coming for Christians, but kind of how long? Is it a defined period like the premils say, or is it just a general kind of understanding that things aren't always going to go well for a believer? And then thirdly, what's the timing of events surrounding this judgment? Okay, so you got that? This is what we need to now figure out. I haven't even got to other departures. So let's just first have a look at these 3 issues and see where an amillennial view, these are points of departure. There's an amillennial view and a premillennial view. And that's really all we're doing is comparing these views. You've got these data points in your mind. As I go through points of departure here, think through which of those 2 makes best sense of these questions. So firstly, what kind of kingdom? So the amillennial view says that it is a spiritual kingdom. So it's a spiritual kingdom, In other words, this is the amillennial view. We're living in it now. So whatever it means, this handing over of the kingdom to the saints, it's what Christians today are hopefully experiencing. And so it's largely related to spiritual issues, peace and blessings and a sense of nearness to God and an overcoming of sin in our flesh. It's those kinds of issues that pertain mainly to our relationship with God for the most part. Please understand there's so many, I'm making generalizations here, but largely amillennials see that this kingdom is happening now, and it is therefore largely spiritual. As I said to you last week, some amillennials actually hold that there is this millennial kingdom, but in heaven, so where the departed righteous are currently, that's obviously a very spiritual reign, but then there's still some influence through believers living out their Christian lives now and seeing some sort of aspects of the kingdom of God come to life through their behavior in faith. But it's largely spiritual things. When you're thinking kingdom as an amillennial, you're thinking about spiritual things. Premillennial view says no, when we speak about the saints inheriting or receiving the kingdom, they are talking about a future earthly kingdom. So they're thinking about a period in time in the future where things are like they are on earth. It's far more of what we know about life today. There are even nations present. There is ways of life present that we know now. But when they're thinking kingdom, they're thinking very much more life as we know it now minus evil. And I'm going to unpack these two a lot more later because there is a very strong underlying premise here that is informing both of these views. But for now, we're just talking about Daniel 7. What kind of kingdom are we thinking about here? In the context of Daniel 7. Later, we'll blow that up through the whole Bible and look at these two views, a material view versus a spiritual view. But for now, in Daniel chapter 7, if you are trying to unpack the question, you see the statement, the saints of the Most High God receive the kingdom and receive dominion. What are your immediate references to understand kingdom in Daniel? Your immediate references are the other dominions. The word dominion is used a lot. Your immediate references for kingdom are the kingdoms of this world. You've got the three other beasts that are described there in some detail and through Daniel. If you're just reading Daniel, your mind is just on this track of earthly human kingdoms, but so evil. The dragon Satan is animating the evil in these leaders, so it's terrible. But your mind would then naturally jump to, okay, so there will be a future kingdom. It will be hard pressed, I think, and again, I'm just jumping to my view here, but I want you to think about this. You'd be hard pressed to jump to a suddenly spiritual view in Daniel, because you've been preconditioned through chapter 2 and chapter 7 to only been thinking kings, rulers, earthly kings, kingdoms, dominions, authorities. That's all that's been in your mind. It would be quite a change of how you're reading Daniel. You'd be reading it one way and you'd have to adapt. It's like putting on a brand new set of glasses to all of a sudden jump into a spiritual view. Now, I'm not saying you can't do that. Many people, of course, do this, but from the context of Daniel 7, it's unlikely. You can do it easier in other texts, but when you come to Daniel 7, it's like, man, that's hard to do. It's hard to justify jumping to a spiritual view when you've got earthly kingdoms loaded in your mind. And so it seems to be the natural progression is we're talking earthly kingdoms as we know them, now replaced by the rule not of evil kings, but Jesus Christ. God himself ruling now instead of kings and giving ruling authority to believers, much like we were intended to be back in Genesis chapter 1, to have some kind of measure of rule and authority. So that's, I think, more likely what you're thinking in Daniel 7. So if you have a spiritual view, that's okay. You're allowed to have one. I think you're going to be struggling more in Daniel 7. Granted, other passages, you might be struggling less, but I think you're struggling in Daniel chapter 7. Okay, so that's just on the type of kingdom. We'll get into that a lot more later. Secondly, how long is the persecution? Is it, like I said, for amillennials, is just largely, it's symbolic that there will be a time of struggle and it might increase, but premillennials have a very, very defined view of a period of time precipitated by an antichrist who makes war on the saints. So, to figure that out and see which are we more likely looking at in Daniel, let's do some Bible maths. I said on Sunday we didn't do it, and you were also disappointed, hey? Heard those groans. You were just dying to know what a time, times, and half a time referred to. Let's go there. So in this in the scriptures here, that's what we read. That, remember in verse 25. Let me go back to that actually. Here you go. So this Antichrist fellow will speak words, wear out the saints, change the times and law. They'll be given into his hand. So he has a measure of dominion, but for a time, times, and half a time. So now we're thinking about, is that a very specific reference, or is that more likely just a general sense that there's persecution coming, but it could be, a year, it could be 1,000 years, or etc. So let's try and figure that out a little bit by doing some Bible math. So first clue, if we're trying to understand what the phrase a time, times, and half a times means, again, this is just good Bible interpretation skills. What's the nearest reference point you've got? So can you look in Daniel 7 and see that phrase? No, that's the only time. So then you look back. 6, no. 5, no. 4, yes. You get to Daniel 4, and this word, it's an Aramaic word, we're still in the Aramaic part of Daniel, comes up 4 times, referring to the time of Nebuchadnezzar's madness. So the period from which he was struck mad, which at this point you'd go, well, that seems to be a defined period, likely years, but you could equally argue it's just a defined period of time. It may not be exactly, I think there it was 7 years. So anyway, you get from Daniel 4 an indication that perhaps it means a year. So just to note that, so time would be then 1 year. Times means 2, not multiple. So it's time, 2 times, half a time. So it's 2 plus 1 plus a half. Bible maths. You got your calculators out? You don't need your calculators for that one. Okay. So 3.5 years. So, okay, but that's not for sure certain. I mean, not at all. So let's carry on. So now, let's jump around a little bit. When we're talking about Daniel, we're talking about end times, we have to, of course, at least crack open the book of Revelation. And if the lights went off there, that would have been so cool. Is it so intimidating for us? But let's go there, have a look at the book of Revelation. And so here's what you will find. And this is just super, super awesome. So in Revelation 12, in verse 6 and in verse 14, I've conveniently highlighted it for you. It's referring to a specific event of this woman fleeing into the wilderness, place prepared by God, where she's nourished for, in verse 6, 1,260 days. In verse 14, same thing, wilderness, nourished. But now, the phrase, a time, times, and half a time. Seems to me those two have an equal sign. So, how many years is 1,260 days? Pull out the calculators, y'all. Come on now. Bring out your calculators. How many years is that? Exactly 3.5. Okay, but if you said 3.5, it's because you already know the trick here. Because if you divide 1260 by 365, what is that number? Someone shout it out to me. 3.45. Okay, so that's not 3.5. But if you divide that number by 360 days, you get 3.5 years. Turns out, Hebrew calendar, 360 days in a Hebrew calendar. So you divide 1260 by 360, you get a very defined period. So this is, I know this can be weird, but it's not complicated. It's times, times, and half a time, 1260 days. It seems likely that the phrase is referring to this period of 3.5 years. Then, if you carry on in Revelation and read to verse 13, and now you read about this beast. And by the way, beast in Revelation 13 is the little horn of Daniel 7. We'll see that later. So this little horn was given a mouth uttering haughty, blasphemous words. Sounds familiar? direct correlation. It was allowed to exercise authority for, in Daniel 7, times and half a time. In Revelation 13, it's 42 months. How many years is 42 months? 3.5 years. Okay? Is that fair? That's not all, folks. When you get to Daniel chapter 9, and let me tell you this, when we get to Daniel chapter 9, I'm going to do part 1, which is this awesome prayer. It's just so amazing. And then the last 4 verses of Daniel 9, which is the following Sunday, I'm going to conveniently be sick that day. So just telling you. Because it is hyper nerdy crazy. This is a warning for you all. But in Daniel chapter 9 is this kind of extended reflection on this period of tribulation. And as you'll see, when we get there, a period of 7 years of dominion is specified as the time that the Antichrist has dominion. But it goes on to say that that time is cut in half, and half of the time he seems good for the people of God and he misleads them, but the other half he turns on them and persecutes them. What's half of 7? Yeah, you guys are getting warmed up tonight. Okay, that's awesome. 3.5 years. So there's that there as well. So all that to say, if you're reading Daniel and Revelation, those two, you would be thinking about a period of persecution where there's a lot. There's 1, 2, 6, 0, 42 months, times, and half a time, 7 divided by 2. Very specific numbers that are given here. And so it seems to me that you're being shaped in a way of thinking very deliberately and very particularly about this time period. It's not natural for you to just symbolize and spiritualize and go, well, it's a 7 years divide 2, that's roughly 1,000 years. You know what I mean? It seems like you're more naturally, as you're reading Daniel, being refined in your thinking to be thinking about a very specific period of time. Okay, so that's just what we're noting. Again, you might have a different view, but it seems like there's dots here. There's dots in Revelation. There's dots throughout Daniel, and those dots have numbers, and those numbers are crazily quite specific, at the very least quite defined. Okay, then in terms of the timing surrounding the events, so Amil and Primo will both say there's a persecution and then comes the kingdom. And what you're seeing in Daniel very clearly is, can you see this at least? The saints undergo persecution. Yes? There's no escape for the saints in the time of persecution. That's why we largely these days really don't hold to a rapture view, where the view that is before tribulation, the church, believing Gentiles, get a pass on the time of tribulation. It sounds great. And look, there's a lot to be said about that, and we'll talk about that next week if you like. But if you're reading Daniel, you don't get the idea that the people of God get a pass. You very clearly get the idea that they undergo a large persecution, and they go through the persecution. And again, this is a data point in Daniel 7. The saints, that progression is the little horn Antichrist persecutes, judgment, kingdom. Is that clear? If you're reading Daniel, persecution, judgment, kingdom. You're not invited to see kingdom as something that precedes persecution and judgment. If you're reading Daniel, this is not the whole Bible. We're just trying to walk you through how we're reading Daniel and how these different models influence your interpretation of it. But what we haven't got to yet, this is still my introduction for tonight, a warm-up. What we haven't got to is what's unclear. Because what was clear is there's a kingdom given to the saints, a time of persecution and a judgment, but then there were nuances. But what we haven't got to is the 10 horns and the little horn. Like, how do those fit in? And here, this is very much a point of departure between an amillennial view and a premillennial view. So let me show you this. I made snazzy diagrams for you all today, so you can see I had a lot more time to prepare today. So this is a diagram kind of showing you, and it is in the notes if you managed to get a copy. So an amillennial view of Daniel, there's the fourth beast, Roman Empire, past. That's common to both views. So that happens. Then the 10 horns. So even in an amillennial view, there's the beast refers to Rome, but then the 10 horns refer to 10 successive kings or rulers that would arise out of the Roman Empire past. So when it kind of collapsed in AD 400, they would see a succession of perhaps nations that had some attachment to the Roman Empire that then got formed. So for example, they would think through European countries. Rome covered all of Western Europe and Eastern Europe, and they would see these nations of Europe that arose out of Roman Empire territory through successive years. That's what the 10 horns refer to, these human kingdoms that arose throughout history. And they wouldn't see it limited to 10, because there's more than 10. So in an amillennial view, you're not taking the number 10 literally. And just note these are points of departure. You're saying 10 is a symbolic number. It's a number that represents completeness, and that's true. 10 is a big, important symbolic number. And that's what makes this argument, is it a symbolic number or a literal number, so difficult, is the numbers chosen are numbers that are highly symbolic, are rich. They go back to Genesis. I mean, Genesis, you have 7 days of creation, but it was 10 acts of God speaking over 7 days. And so the number 70 comes up, and 10 and 7 and multiples, and it's all wonderful. And so amillennials will see the 10 is not, we're not counting, it's just a number. And so it can refer to all of the nations that arose out of the historic Roman Empire. Then they will see then in the future, so past, Roman, current, nations arising out of Rome. Future is, they would believe in an antichrist based on Jesus' Olivet discourses, etc. So there is a time of increased kind of persecution coming. They may not believe in one antichrist. There might be a spirit of lawlessness. We might get into that next week. But either way, future time where the little horn for them refers to future. So even amillennials are time warping. We're all time warping. Let's do the time warp again. Isn't that a song? Everyone's doing the time warp. It's natural. It's cool. It's fun. Let's time warp. So even then it's going Roman Empire, 10 kingdoms. But yeah, it's the geopolitical nations of the world are established. I mean, some are trying to take parts of the others, but they're established. There's a future event coming. The little horn is a future rule of Antichrist. And then after that period, Jesus comes back, boom, eternal state. So that's a millennial view of the 10 horns and little horn. You still with me? That wasn't a very convincing. It was like, ugh. Well, we'll continue. Pre-millennial view of, so let's just jump backwards and just kind of spot some differences. So, pre-millennial view, remember, pre-millennials are adding an intermediate state before the final. So eternal state, I ran out of space. It wasn't a great diagram. So eternal state is still there, but it's now represented at the end. But there's this intermediate kind of period here. So beast itself, Roman Empire past. Yay, we agree on something. Then time gap from beast to 10 horns and little horns is in the future. So amillennial, Rome, 10 horns in the current age, little horn future. Pre-millennials, Rome past, 10 horns plus little horn in the future. And the 10 horns, little horn is a particular view that kind of arising out of the Roman Empire of old. So whether that's its vast expanse from Eastern Europe to Western Europe, that somehow it's a confederacy. This is what it seems to be saying. A confederacy of 10 kings, and then comes another one, and he manages to overthrow 3 of them. The other 7 are likely what's the word? I want to say scared by that or intimidated by that, and so give their allegiance over. And so anyway, we can go into that, but there's this future 10 horns, little horn is coming in the future. Then it's a millennial kingdom, 1,000-year reign, and then eternal state. If you want a cooler picture of this, wait for it. Bam. I did not draw that picture. So, and I don't think I put that one in the notes either. So if you would like that. But yeah, this is what premillennials do. They sketch out with immense attention to detail how these things play out. So it's Israel, there's the lion, the bear, the leopard. Then there's this dreadful beast, Roman Empire. Then now there's this gap leading up to tribulation, which is the 10 horns and little horn, second coming of Christ, millennial kingdom. It's pretty much what I put here, but with color and extra words. So those are the 2 different views around Daniel 7, and it largely diverges at 10 horns and little horns. So what to make of that? When you try and think about this, you're thinking, Is the 10 symbolic? Has it happened already? Is it happening? Or is it still something likely in the future? So to evaluate the two, let me say this. If you look at these pictures, 10, the amillennial view, simpler. Is that fair? Simpler. There's less stuff going on. It's, man, stuff's probably going to get tough. Jesus comes, whoop, bam, eternal state, party forever. Simpler. Premillennial view, a lot more complicated. I'm not making a judgment on that. I'm just saying the one is simpler than the other. Because the premillennial view does have this time gap in it. I mean, amillennials do to some extent, but they can stretch it. The 10 can stretch. Premills, you don't get to stretch. You have to accept we're time warping. And again, I said on Sunday, do you know my cool phrase now? About things that are uncomfortable. You go, I'm getting disappointed. What's uncomfortable becomes comfortable with practice. Charles Osmond, golf coach, deceased, may God rest his soul, told me that. So what's uncomfortable becomes comfortable. And let me just show you again just how there's plenty of this in the scriptures. I'm probably not going to do this too much more on Sundays. I just want you to be aware of this. So Isaiah 61, familiar verse. The Spirit of the Lord God is upon me. He's anointed me to bring good news to the poor, sent me to bind up the brokenhearted, proclaim liberty to the captives, the opening of the prison to those who are bound, to proclaim the year of the Lord's favor and the day of vengeance of our God, to comfort all who mourn. Does that sound familiar to you? Yes? It's a classic Old Testament passage. Have you heard somebody quote that? Jesus Christ. Absolutely. Luke chapter 4 stands up in a temple and he quotes Isaiah 61. The Spirit of the Lord is upon me. But notice, spot the difference. Man, I love playing spot the difference when it comes to the Bible. So the opening of the prison, proclaim the year of the Lord's favor. Luke 4, set at liberty those who are oppressed, to proclaim the year of the Lord's favor, rolls up the scroll, gives it back. This has been fulfilled in your hearing. What did he leave out from Isaiah 61? Did you notice? Did you spot the difference? And the day of vengeance of our God. Why did he stop at the year of the Lord's favor and not go into the day of vengeance? Because the day of vengeance is the future coming. So that day, when you get to here, and the day of vengeance of our God, so Jesus is saying, this part, I'm here, it's happening, it's fulfilled. Without any warning, you've jumped to a verse that still has to take place in the future. You see this? This is how Jesus himself is using these passages. He is saying his first coming is fulfilling some, but there's parts to it that are yet to be fulfilled. Don't you wish Isaiah would write notes here and go, be prepared, put on your oxygen masks, because we are now going to jump into the future. And we would have these cues. But we don't. What we have in the prophetic style of literature in the Bible is that without warning, you're talking about things, yeah, this is cool, this has happened. Oh, wait, we're in the future now? Yes, this is what happens for us. So what I'm saying is premill view is complicated because of time warping, and I'm trying to show you that time warping is not something that you should be afraid of. Second reason why I would interpret Daniel 7 in a premillennial way. And again, you would have noticed on Sunday, I didn't mention the word millennium, didn't bring this. This is for you guys, because you here tonight. I'm not trying to introduce things on a Sunday, but the way that I do interpret Daniel is with this premill understanding. I think it better fits the data. Because in the premillennium view, remember the 10 kings and little horn are squashed into one corner. So it's a confederacy. They are contemporaries, these 10 kings. Whereas the amillennial view is they are successive. Why do I think they can't be successive? Well, like I said on Sunday though, see if you know, said that the little horn subdues 3. So the Antichrist dominates 3 other kings. If they're successive, meaning one ruler hands over to the next ruler, it means you have to go back to Oaks, who 2 times dead, to dominate them. So this is detail. These are data points. I'm just, I'm not trying to make a joke here. or be facetious. I mean it. These are data points. You're thinking through this and you're going, how do I make sense of one overcomes three of them if they're successive? That seems unlikely. But if there is a view where these are all contemporary, i.e. in the future, we don't know how, but it's possible, then that one would be more likely. If you're not yet convinced, again, let's go to Revelation 13. Now you have to see Revelation 13. I'm just going to read it to you. Okay, I've done some of the work there, but I want you to see how John's apocalypse is mapping with Daniel's vision. Okay, so just read. I saw a beast rising out of the sea with 10 horns, 7 heads. Could it be? You're just thinking, oh, that sounds familiar. Could there be a correlation here? With 10 diadems on its horns and blasphemous names on its heads. And the beast that I saw was like a leopard. Its feet were like a bear's, and its mouth was like a lion's mouth. Do you remember the 3 beasts before the 4th beast, which is not named? What are they? Lion, leopard, bear. Do you think this is coincidence? It seems unlikely. It seems like in Revelation 13, you're a student of the Bible, you've read through Daniel on your way to Revelation, like, yeah, I know that imagery. This is bringing me back to Daniel chapter 7. And to the beast, to the dragon, who, let me just tell you in Revelation, that Satan himself gave his power and his throne and great authority. Remember, the beast of Revelation 13 is the little horn antichrist of Daniel 7. So the dragon gives this antichrist power. That's where his power comes from. So I want you to note this. When we're talking about these things and this persecution in the end times, we're ultimately talking about the real clash of kingdoms, which is the kingdom of God, good and evil. So here he is. He's giving power and great authority. One of its heads seemed to have a mortal wound, but its mortal wound was healed. The whole earth marveled as they followed the beast. And they worshipped the dragon, for he had given his authority to the beast. And they worshipped the beast, saying, who's like the beast? Who can fight against it? So he becomes a really dominant worldwide figure, not in one little corner of the world. You see it globally. And the beast was given a mouth uttering haughty and blasphemous words. Sound familiar? It was allowed to exercise authority. This is what I read to you. 42 months, opened its mouth to utter blasphemies against God, blaspheming his name, his dwelling, those who dwell in heaven. And it was allowed to make war on the saints and to conquer them. So now, what am I saying? What I'm saying is the 10 horn thing is in Revelation 13 as a unit. Most people believe we're talking about the future. So you're already transporting 10 horns to the future because of Revelation 13. So the likelihood of it being successive kingdoms fulfilled in our past, well, if you understand Revelation as thinking future and you're seeing all these links, you're going, that doesn't seem to make best sense of all of the data points. And then you have this as well, Revelation 17. And the 10 horns that you saw are 10 kings who have not yet received royal power, but they are to receive authority as kings for 1 hour together with the beast. So here's the 10 horns, and they receive power together with the beast for 1 hour. That is contemporary language. They together, all together, receive, in other words, as weird as it sounds, guys, and this is weird, if you're reading Revelation in conjunction with Daniel, you would naturally be thinking not succession, you would be thinking future event, 10 together. I'm thinking the premillennial framework better takes account of this. So yes, I would say the amillennial view is simple, but it doesn't account for all the dots. And let me just go on record, if you like, and say, and I mean this, there's nothing in Daniel 7 that a premillennial framework can't make sense of. There's no dots that it does not connect. However, with an amillennial view, you have to do a lot of spiritualizing. So you're changing methods of reading the Bible from literal thinking to all of a sudden spiritualizing. So is this me trying to persuade you to a particular view? Well, I suppose so. But what I really want you to know for tonight is how I got here. I did not come into studying Daniel maybe you guys have a view of me. I just want to correct something here. But when I came and started at Rosebank 2.5 years ago, I did not come preloaded with all knowledge. Just want that on record. I am learning too, okay? I am learning hugely as we go. So this is what I have been studying now for a long, long time in preparation for this series, but it's new to me. I came into it with far more of an amillennial framework. In fact, an entrenched amillennial framework. Prior to studying for Daniel, though, I was nudged along, not fully changing, but nudged along by these underlying principles that I'm now going to get to. But I came in with this amillennials, nudged along, open to maybe there's a better framework for reading the Bible, but I can tell you that through studying Daniel in particular, and I know I've still got to study the rest of the Bible and all the other things, but from what I'm knowing of Daniel, the framework that best accounts for this is that. And I want to say this is what we should be doing, guys. What my journey here, the reason I'm explaining it to you is not rhetoric. I hope it's instructive in the sense of this is what I hope people of God do, where we all have pre-understandings. So we have views that I'd like to say we inherit or borrow from people. So inherit meaning church traditions we grew up in, or when we became a Christian, the circles, we just inherited. We just assumed them. Sometimes we intentionally borrow. There's a famous pastor or preacher we like, and whatever he says goes. But we have these pre-understandings, and we're there, and, and the good thing is, as you're reading the Bible, be constantly critiquing. Is what I'm reading, is the theological frameworks, and I'm not just talking millennial, I'm talking other frameworks. It's like, is what I'm reading as I'm studying the text by text by text, is it confirming models that I have in my head, or is it challenging them? And I found studying Daniel intensely challenging it. And so this picture, I don't expect you to see it, and it's not in your notes as well, I know that late today, but is this idea of a hermeneutical spiral. Basically to mean when we're studying the Bible, there's a process that we go through. There's pre-understanding, and then we have kind of biblical theology as we're studying Daniel. We're going, is this match my pre-understanding or not? At the same time, systematic theology, so eschatology, the frameworks I have, is this match what I'm reading? And at the same time, there's these data points, and you're constantly interacting. And I don't mean deconstruct everything you've ever learned. Like, I love that there are inherited doctrines and inherited theologies. It's awesome if they're correct. Yes? And so the right thing to do as a believer is not to be in a panic every time, but just to be constantly aware of this. That I have these pre-understandings. Well, what am I reading? Does it match my pre-understanding? What else can I read about the subject? And you're constantly trying to develop. And that's how you're going to grow. Amen? Let's all go home. Except, no, that was a joke because we haven't even started tonight. That was the introduction. I will finish at 8:30. So, how are we all doing out there? You still alive? You can give me a nod so just so I know you're alive. Okay, still thinking? Brain still alive? Some? All right, again, not super encouraging to me. Okay, I know a lot of this is overwhelming, and I don't know, maybe we should have done it over a longer period of time, but maybe just some things are sinking in. That'd be great. So, let's jump in and let me tell you really what has influenced me in thinking around eschatology. This is not Revelation 20. That's not. These bigger things. So let me go through 3 underlying principles, ways of thinking about the Bible, that if you think this way, you will end up amillennial, or if you think this way, you will end up premillennial. Let me just show you those underlying principles and see what that means to you. So number 1, underlying principle informing these 2 models is a spiritual vision model versus a new creation model. So this is an assumption that you can trace the millennial views in history. So early church, premillennial, Middle Ages, time of Augustine, amillennial, post-Reformation, premillennial became popular again. And you can trace the rise and fall of millennial views based on what was happening in philosophical thought around the time. So this is really like going a few steps below these models. So what we mean here is basically has to do with the question, what is the nature of the final state? And I just want to ask you, just think for a moment. When you think about eternity, what's in your mind? I want you to really think about that. That's what this people generally fall into, one or two models. And I would just love for you to have a sense of what you believe. When you think about eternity, what kinds of things come to mind? Here's two different ways that people think about it. So, spiritual vision model versus new creation model. Basically, it comes down to, is your view of eternity, number one, otherworldly? In other words, it has no link to life as you know it now. It's something completely different. It's another world. It might as well be a parallel universe. It's nothing like life you know it now. That's the spiritual vision model, is when you think about the eternal state, it's just otherworldly, or when you think about it, is it more kind of this worldly? In other words, when you think about the promises of God being fulfilled one day, when they come to pass, will it be fundamentally some continuity with life as you know it now? Like you see life as you know it now kind of fundamentally continuing as we largely know it? Or do you expect that we will be delivered from this way of life and transported to a completely other way of life that is radically different? If you think that delivered and radically transported to a radically different, you're in a spiritual vision model person. But if your view of eternity is more like life as we know it now, and you have a very earthly sense of what that's like, then you're in a new creation kind of person. Let me spell this out for you. So, number one, if you think it's radically different, the spiritual vision model. So people who you think that thought biblically through this are informed predominantly with texts that speak about eternity as primarily got to do with relationship with God. Are there texts like that in the Bible? Oh, yes. So, I mean, we're not making stuff up here. Jesus says, and this is eternal life, that they know you, the only true God, and Jesus Christ, whom you have sent. And so, in the spiritual vision model of eternity, heaven, or the final state, is a realm of the spirit, where everything is spiritual as opposed to material, as in matter. And that spiritual state is the highest possible state. A material is very low and earthly, and what's better is to be transported to a more spiritual kind of state. And so spiritual vision model sees eternity and the destiny of saved people that will exist in a non-earthly, spiritual place as spiritual beings engaged in spiritual activity. Worship, relationship with God. Do you get what I mean here? It's entirely spiritual. So therefore, the spiritual vision model sees kingdom as primarily spiritual. That's what I spoke about before. This is the amillennial view. When you're thinking about kingdoms, you're largely, it seems attractive to you, if I can say that, because your pre-understanding, the way you've grown up and all that you've known is when you think about eternity, it's primarily spiritual. And so it's natural to spiritualize a lot of the things that you're reading in Daniel. They don't have to be literal events. It doesn't have to be, it can just be spiritual because that's largely your view. So need to say, the spiritual vision model, and you can do a lot more work on this, it's fascinating. Kind of Augustine was the guy who kind of championed this sort of back in the day, and it's really interesting how that all came about. But it's your view on the final end of things is spiritual beings in a spiritual place engaged in spiritual types of activities based on texts that speak about eternal life in those kinds of ways. That's spiritual vision model. Now, on the other hand, new creation model. New creation model says that the final eternal state is essentially, and get this, it is essentially continuous of that of present day life minus evil. Can you note that point? Those who have a new creation model are by no means going, this is eternal state. It is life as we kind of know it, but minus any evil. And have you heard me say something like that recently? And I ended the whole sermon on Sunday, like I said, now you know, like this is where I'm headed. And let me tell you why. So life in the kingdom of God, for new creation model people, it's like what it was supposed to be, what it was in Genesis 1, where humankind ruled over creation. They see Adam and Eve in the garden as that's the way it was supposed to be. It got ruined through rebellion, but that's the way it will go to again. And so we'll look at Adam and go, Adam was, not tasked he was tasked to rule over earth in a very earthly way. Adam was not made to sit on a cloud forever. Okay, and that's been really pejorative towards a spiritual vision view. But I'm making a point here. This new creation people are just going, yeah, look at Adam and look at Eve and look at the way they interacted in an earth that was created beautifully and it had dominion, and they're returning to that. So for new creation model, the new heavens and the new earth is not a spiritual experience primarily. Let me quote to you from Russell Moore, who I really like. He says, the point of the gospel is not that we would go to heaven when we die. Instead, it is that heaven will come down, transforming and renewing the earth and the entire universe. He goes on to say, the picture then of the future is not of an eschatological flight from creation, but the restoration and redemption of creation with all that it entails: table fellowship, community, culture, economics, agriculture, and art, architecture, worship. In short, life and life abundantly. To put it very simply, a new creation model says God has not abandoned his creation, he wants to restore it. So we won't be transported to a different spiritual place done with that earth. No, God's intention is to restore what has been broken. And so this model doesn't reject anything physical as being unspiritual. So it sees creation and material things as not bad things. It sees, that's why it's a new creation model, emphasis on creation, but also emphasis on new. So don't be thinking too earthly, because it will be different. In this model, we are immortal. Of course, there's no death. There's no sin that exists. We are completely glorified in character, and therefore we have communion with each other in unhindered ways and communion with God in unhindered ways. And so the knowing God is not removed, it's just not extracted to only a spiritual reality. It is a spiritual reality that takes place in an earthly reality. So it's not saying no material views whatsoever, but saying the Holy Spirit comes and redeems material. And we live in this renewed material bodies, a new material earth, but it's much like earth as we know it now. How about some scriptures for you? I had this awesome diagram. Too complicated. We'll move on. Maybe another time. But Isaiah 25, I know, man, I've got to move quickly now. So Isaiah 25. So just again, you know where I'm going. You know where my heart is at. But just try read this without knowing where I'm coming from, and be thinking to yourself, new creation model, spiritual vision model. So just Isaiah 25. On this mountain, the Lord of hosts will make for all peoples a feast of rich food, a feast of well-aged wine, a rich food full of marrow, of aged wine well refined. Who's thinking that sounds good? I mean, I don't know. I'm thinking this sounds awesome. If this is literally true, sign me up. I would love for my final state to include well-aged wine and food. I mean, again, really, where this is going is spiritual vision model will see this as poetic description of a final state will not read into it literally. Whereas you could. Why not? And that, by the way, is a great Reformation phrase. Literal where possible. So if it's possible, why not? And he will swallow up on this mountain the covering that is cast over all peoples, the veil that is spread over all nations. What is that? Death. So no death, but lots of good food and wine. No getting inebriated and committing evil though, because that's gone, hey? And the Lord will wipe away tears from all faces, and the reproach of his people, the shame, will be taken away from all the earth. Guys, how good is this? I mean, really, if you're just confused about eschatology, man, if you just load into your brain Isaiah 25, and if it's spiritual vision and it's poetically describing eternal state, well, it's still describing something presumably awesome. If it's new creation model and you're like, man, this sounds good to me. It'll be said on that day, behold, this is our God. We have waited for him that he might save us. This is the Lord. We have waited for him. Let us be glad and rejoice in his salvation. So either when you read this, you see it as poetic, symbolic, and you spiritualize it, and the eternal state is a spiritual vision, or you see it a lot more kind of literally fulfilled. New creation, you're like, in a new creation model, this makes sense. Everything's been redeemed. We have no problem with this being literally fulfilled. So those are the two views. Notice they're very different, but they're not exact opposites. So spiritual vision says spiritual things good, material things largely not good. New creation model doesn't just invert that, go material good, spiritual bad. Do you see that? It goes, no, it's spiritual and material coming together. Very different, not opposite. Spiritual vision, spirit good, material bad. New creation vision, spirit comes into material and completely restores it. That's the new creation model. And so new creation model just sees that material and spiritual was created by God anyway. Colossians 1 verse 15 to 16. So Jesus, image of the invisible God. By him all things were created in heaven and on earth, visible and invisible. Thrones, dominions, rulers, authorities. It's like, hey, he made the spiritual and the material. He means for the spiritual to redeem the material. For me, and I'm just being open with you now, you're here, and I want you to know I've been on a journey. And when I was learning this, and it was not in the context of Daniel, it was just learning about these models, I got a little moist in the eyes thinking about new creation model. It fills me with such great joy and optimism, knowing that the beautiful things of life as I know it today are not bad, but are redeemed completely, and I have this vision of a future that is everything good minus the evil. For me is so compelling. I mean, biblically, I think it makes sense, but I'm just being honest with you. There was a heart connection with this, not just a brain connection. It might be different for you due to your understandings, but for me, this moved me a lot because it's a fundamental pillar of premillennialism and new creation model. You can't have a premillennial view without a new creation model because you're literally talking about a reign on earth. And so unless it's been redeemed, it can't be Christ's reign. So there's no premillennialism without a new creation model. And so it's a pillar, and like, man, that did move me. Maybe it doesn't move you, and that's okay. All right, number 2, underlying principles. Can you see where I'm getting at with this? Deep ways that we think about the Bible and life that inform these views. Number 2, the relationship of the Old Testament to the New Testament. So here, the argument goes between amillennials and new millennials. Did I say new millennials? Premillennials. Now the argument goes something like this. When we read the New Testament, it fundamentally changes the way we read the Old Testament. And that's correct. Yes? Yes. We read, for example, Hebrews 8 to 10, the sacrificial system is over. It's gone. It's there in the Old Testament. It's a huge feature of the Old Testament. It is the foundation of the Mosaic covenant. Leviticus, the laws given in Leviticus. So you read the New Testament, do we believe that that sacrifices will continue? Yo, this is a no. That's an easy no. This is an easy no. Yeah, they made me worried. No. Christ came, one sacrifice, the one high priest. So yes, when we read the New Testament, we see a lot of the Old Testament has been fulfilled. The sacrificial system is the primary example that everybody agrees on. So that's not the debate. The debate is this. If you see that some of the New Testament, so the first coming of Christ and the death and resurrection of Christ, if you see that the death and resurrection of Christ is this pivotal event that has replaced or fulfilled a lot of Old Testament prophecies, then you extract from that the idea that therefore, and I'm generalizing here, but therefore you see that that is now a governing interpretive principle. So when you read the Old Testament, we're seeing all of it as having been fulfilled by the future event of Christ. And so with that view, then, Old Testament prophecy has all been fulfilled, at least in part. And I hope I'm correct in saying this and representing an amillennial view clearly, but I think I am. I would say that all of the Old Testament prophecies have at least in part been fulfilled. There is nothing left over in the Old Testament that is yet to find fulfillment. The New Testament has overshadowed all of it. It has led to the fulfillment of all of it. It is the governing a testament, and therefore all of the Old Testament is subsumed and completed in this New Testament model. So that's an amillennial view. And so therefore you're reading the Old Testament and it's all found some measure of fulfillment in Christ, most of it fully fulfilled. There's nothing left empty in the Old Testament. There's nothing you're reading and going, man, that sounds like you're reading, drinking wine and marrow. No, that you're seeing that as current. And that's somehow poetically describing the joy that we have as believers. It's as though we are feasting and it's great. You're not reading that as that is a dot yet to be fulfilled in the future, because the overarching principle is the New Testament completely overshadows the Old Testament. That's an amillennial view. It's a way you read the Old Testament. It's a way of thinking. Now, this gets really complicated, but here's what premillennials will say. See, they will say, let me try to put it simply. They will say this: yes, there are substantial elements of the Old Testament that have been fulfilled and subsumed and fall away by the New Testament. But what premillennials will say, that does not lead us with a new interpretive principle, where therefore we apply that where it is, we see some clear fulfillment, we read it in the New Testament, we see parts of it fulfilled. That does not mean that we apply that to everything. Premillennials will say we go case by case. So where clearly the New Testament has shown that it's been fulfilled, we're on board with that. But if it hasn't specifically said that it's been fulfilled by the New Testament, then it still remains open. It's still an open prediction and an open prophecy. And that actually is this cool picture. And I'm not going to do all the detail, but this is a premillennial view. So basically we'll say the Mosaic covenant, all of Leviticus, etc., replaced by new covenant. I mean, don't mistake here. Premillennials see new covenant as completely eradicating Mosaic covenant. But, and this is another subject, Davidic covenant, yet to be fulfilled. Amillennials, fulfilled. Abrahamic covenant, yet to be fulfilled. Amillennials, fulfilled. And so that's just, there are parts, premillennials will say there are parts that have been fulfilled, but that does not mean that everything has been fulfilled. Can I give you an example? All right, so Acts chapter 3. So Acts chapter 3, this should be familiar to you. This was Pentecost Sunday. Times of refreshing may come from the presence of the Lord. So let me read this to you. So Peter preaching to Jewish people says, but what God foretold by the mouth of all the prophets. So in the Old Testament book, Peter's saying, God foretold that his Christ would suffer, the Messiah would suffer. He fulfilled. So we're looking at this and going, Old Testament predicted a Messiah would come and he would suffer, Isaiah 53 and others. Bam, fulfilled. That's happened. We're not looking for another Messiah to suffer. It's over, it's nullified, it's out. Repent, therefore, and turn back, that your sins may be blotted out, that times of refreshing may come from the presence of the Lord, and that he may send the Christ appointed for you, Jesus, whom heaven must receive until the time of restoring all things, about which God spoke by the mouth of his holy prophets long ago. So do you see what's happening here? Peter's got the Old Testament in his hand, and he's going, the prophet said a Messiah would come and he would suffer and die. That has happened. And then he goes on to say, and the prophets have said that this Messiah, after he suffered and died, would go, he may go back, heaven must receive. He'll be received into heaven until a time, guys, he's saying, for the restoring all things that the prophet spoke about. So prophet said he would come, done. Prophet said that he's going to come back and restore all things. Is it done or not done? It's not done. He hasn't come back yet. He has not restored all things. So again, we're reading this and you're being technical. Has the time of restoring all things happened? No, it hasn't. We have times of refreshing. So there's glimpses of the future to be received in the presence through the Holy Spirit and Pentecost. That was Pentecost Sunday. But the time of restoring all things has not happened. That happens when he comes again. He restores the creation and makes it the new creation. And Peter's going, part of the Old Testament, done, part, open. And so this would lead one, if you're reading this, to really see this thing of, man, there are some things that still remain open. So basically what premillennials would say is if an Old Testament promise was not fulfilled by Jesus' first coming, we don't have to spiritualize it. We can just see it as happening later. Can you see this? I want to try make this point. When premillennials see an Old Testament prediction that has not yet happened, it wasn't fulfilled with Christ's first coming, an amillennial will spiritualize that and see it fulfilled in some way now. A premillennial will go, no, it doesn't have to be fulfilled. We can just see it as fulfilled later. Like, why not? These prophecies remain open. In other words, for a premillennial, your reading of the Old Testament, let me just say, this is a lot more exciting because you're reading through stuff and going, man, is this still going to happen? Awesome. And so the Old Testament, I think to summarize it, this is what one of my tutors, my tutor that you'll read next week, said to me when we were chatting about these things. He said, my millennial view, is not based on Revelation 20. It's based on the fact of what do you do with the prophets? So what do you do with the prophets? When you're reading these prophets, what do you do? So let's go through, I'm going to do, that's the last point that I wanted to make. So let's just go through some examples and then we'll end. So Zechariah 9, verse 9 to 10. I missed one. No? Oh, here we go. No? Isaiah, okay, let's go to Isaiah 2. Is that this one? Okay, here we go. So let's go. Why don't I think Zechariah? Oh, that's why I want to go there. Sorry. That is there. Okay, sorry. Zechariah 9, verse 9 to 10. Again, read this. I mean, if you're not convinced by this. Rejoice greatly, O daughter of Zion. Shout aloud. Your king is coming to you, righteous and having salvation, humble and mounted on a donkey, on a colt, the foal of a donkey. You're reading the Old Testament. Was that fulfilled? Yes. Carry on reading. I will cut off the chariot from Ephraim, the war horse from Jerusalem. The battle bow shall be cut off. He shall speak peace to the nations. His rule will be from sea to sea, from the river to the ends of the earth. Has that happened? No. And so again, A, you're time warping, but B, you're seeing part fulfilled in Christ. But we know that. There's texts about that. But the parts that have not been fulfilled, we look at, we would read that and go, yes, there will literally be peace among nations. There will still be this idea of people gathering and the society orchestrate it in some way, but there'll be peace. And his rule will be from sea to sea. I'm glad I didn't skip over that one. Cool, hey? Okay, so Old Testament. Now what do we do with Old Testament prophets? And again, just digging deeper into this. And this is a bent of mine. It's what do you do with them? So Isaiah 2, the word that Isaiah, and I want you, before I read this will be the last heavy bit of thinking I'll get you to do, is just, has this happened? That's what I want you to think. What I'm reading to you, has this happened or not yet happened? Okay. The word that Isaiah, son of Amos, saw concerning Judah and Jerusalem. It shall come to pass in the latter days that the mountain of the house of the Lord shall be established as the highest of the mountains, shall be lifted up above the hills, and all the nations shall flow to it. So Mount Zion, Jerusalem will be established as the high, all the nations will come. Many peoples will come and say, come, let's go to the mountain of the Lord, to the house of the God of Jacob, that he may teach us his ways, that we may walk in his paths. For out of Zion shall go forth the law and the word of the Lord. So there's the laws going out, the word of the Lord from Jerusalem. He will judge between the nations. He will decide disputes for many peoples. They shall beat their swords into plowing instruments, their spears into agricultural hooks. Nation won't lift up sword against nation. No wars, neither shall they learn war anymore. Is this a good picture of the future or bad picture? It's a good picture. Right? We literally reading no wars. So military budgets are transformed into agricultural budgets. Let's imagine. Right? For more feasting, wine and beer. Eh? So it's this good picture, but now let me ask you this. So think critically here. This hasn't happened yet, yes? It's in the future, but is it the final state? Is this a picture of the end? No. Why do I say that? Because there's still disputes. Do you read that here? He shall judge between the nations, shall decide disputes for many peoples. So, in the premillennial view, the dragon, Satan, has been constrained. There's no external animating influence. But we're not in our new creation bodies just yet. And so, things aren't perfect, but there's no war. So, if you're just reading this literally, it's this idea of this intermediate state. It's not the final state. But man, it's not now. So what is it? An intermediate one. Now, you may think I'm making a big thing about this verse, but this did move me a lot because there's so many. But for example, Micah 4 verse 1-4 is almost word for word the same thing. Shall come to pass in latter days, highest of the mountains, nations, plowshares, the whole deal. But then in verse 4, Micah adds this, which I love. But they shall sit every man under his vine and under his fig tree, and no one shall make them afraid. So it's the same vision. It's not the final state. There's still this disputing, but you're not afraid. So there's no fear, and you're sitting under your vine. I mean, you're in your garden, and things are lacking, you're not afraid. How awesome. But it's potentially not the final state yet. And there's lots more. Let me read this one to you. This is a long one, but it's familiar. For behold, I create new heavens and a new earth. This is Isaiah 65. New heavens and a new earth, former things shall not be remembered. Be glad and rejoice. I create Jerusalem to be a joy, her people to be a gladness. I will rejoice in Jerusalem, be glad in my people. No more weeping. No more shall there be in it an infant who lives but a few days. So you're reading this, literally, babies won't die. Nor an old man who does not fill out his days. For the young man shall die 100 years old. Like if you die at 100, you're young in Isaiah 65. And the sinner who 100 years old shall be accursed. So there's this idea of, man, if you only make it to 100, shame, sorry for you, like long life. They shall build houses, inhabit them, plant vineyards, eat their fruit. Again, food. Maybe I'm so motivated because it's food. I do love food. They shall not build and another inhabit. They shall not plant and another eat. For like the days of a tree shall the days of my people be. My chosen shall long enjoy the work of their hands. Oh, so we're still going to work. Okay, but we'll enjoy it though. So that's cool. They shall not labor in vain. I am getting into gardening now. Not yet into it, but starting to get a little bit into it. And I can see how that might be awesome. I plant something and it grows. Or bear children for calamity. They shall be the offspring of the blessed. The wolf and the lamb shall graze together. The lion shall eat straw like the ox. The dust shall be the serpent's food. They shall not hurt or destroy in all my holy mountains, says the Lord. Is this current? No. As I've said before, if you are walking down the street and you meet a lion and he wants to eat you, do not say, Isaiah 65, brother, eat straw. It will not help. You will still get eaten. So we are not living in this time. Is this the final state though? Is this Isaiah 65 the final state? Man, it's darn good. Is it the end? No. Why? Still death. But you're not dying young. So parents aren't weeping over losing their children. Everyone's living to a ripe old age. There's death because we're still in mortal bodies. So we're not final state, but we're not now. This was so influential for me because I'm reading the Bible and you're reading each text and going, man, okay, there's data points here. And I need to tell you, it was a long journey of being uncomfortable with the view. Long. But this just kind of, for me, just becomes, I can't ignore it anymore. It seems to be saying that the idea of an intermediate state, as weird as it is to think about and as complicated as it is, there's just so many texts like this. It connects more dots, especially in the Old Testament. For an amillennial view, you're reading Isaiah 65 and you're spiritualizing those. And again, I'm not saying that's necessarily wrong. There are lots of people who do that. I think personally I'm more drawn towards the idea of literal where possible. And I'm reading this. I don't see why not literally fulfilled. Do you? Why not? And for me, this as it is, as it stands, is so compelling, man. It gives me a sense of hope for the future. It gives me a sense of delight for today. Can I say that? For me, this enriches my current life. And that's why I'm talking to you about these things, because it's not just about Revelation 20. Like, man, it should give you hope for tomorrow, knowing it. Either way, hey, if you're amil or premill, Jesus comes, he wraps stuff up, it's all good if you believe in him. Yes? Celebrate that. And both views, he's sovereign over the current. So there's hope for tomorrow, but for me, this view brings delight for today in hugely relevant ways, in the way that I think about my life now, in the way that I think about creation now, and the mandate for man to take care of creation. You know, again, if you don't have a new creation model, you just go, well, the earth, man, God's going to throw it in the trash can anyway, so who cares? Let's just ditch it. Why do a spray cleanup on Saturday? By the way, sign up for spray cleanup on Saturday. But new creation model, you're like, yeah, this is going to be it. Like, come on now, this is our space. Anyway, that for me really is, there's biblical principles here that I think lead to better interpretation of the Bible. There's more data points that get connected. And to be honest with you, for me, gives me more joy for today as well as a bright hope for tomorrow. Hopefully, it'll do that for you. Let's pray. Lord, I really do hope that tonight, that despite this overwhelming flood of information, that we all walk out of here and wake up tomorrow. I really literally pray for this, Lord, that we wake up tomorrow with a sense of joy in our hearts, that we can approach the day with a sense of optimism and enthusiasm, with also a sobriety, but with a sense of joy, knowing that you are currently restoring things, but man, one day you will completely renew it. And we look forward to that day. Grant to us all a great hope for the future and a great strength for today. Amen.